Right now, while you're watching this, a clock is running in your body. It's been running since your 30s, quietly, almost unnoticeable. But somewhere in your 60s, that clock changes speed. It doesn't just keep ticking, it starts ticking faster. And the frightening part isn't the ticking itself. It's that almost nobody hears it until the damage is already done, until a fall sends someone to the hospital, until a hip fracture becomes the event that ends someone's independence for good, until a simple flight of stairs becomes something to dread instead of something to climb without a second thought. This clock has a name. Doctors call it sarcopenia, the progressive loss of muscle mass and strength that comes with age. And here's the part that should genuinely alarm you. It is not a straight line. It doesn't decline at the same steady pace your whole life. It accelerates, and the acceleration begins right around the decade so many people treat as just another birthday. But and this is the entire reason we're having this conversation. That clock is not fixed. It can be slowed, in some cases dramatically. And it comes down to three specific, well-researched levers that most people over 60 have never been told about clearly, in plain language, in one place. We're going to cover all three today. What's actually accelerating, why it accelerates when it does, and exactly what slows it down. Starting with the muscle itself, moving to what's on your plate, and ending with something as simple and as overlooked as a good night's sleep. Let's be honest about what this decline actually looks like in a real life. Because the clinical language, sarcopenia, muscle atrophy, doesn't capture the way it actually shows up. It shows up as a jar lid that used to open easily and now needs someone else's hands. It shows up as walking a little slower through the grocery store, not because you're in a hurry to get anywhere less, but because your legs simply don't move the way they used to. It shows up in the moment you catch yourself gripping the stair railing a little tighter than you did last year, and you notice it, and you don't say anything about it to anyone. These moments feel personal, even embarrassing, but they are not unique to you, and they are not simply getting older in some vague, unavoidable sense. They are the visible surface of a specific, measurable, biological process, and understanding that process is the first step to doing something about it. Muscle mass begins its slow decline as early as your mid-30s. For most of your 40s and 50s, that decline is gradual, almost imperceptible year to year. But research consistently shows the rate of loss speeds up significantly around 60 and beyond, with a clearer, well-documented acceleration point occurring after 65 in women and 70 in men specifically. By the time someone reaches their 70s without having done anything to intervene, nearly 1 in 3 older adults struggles with basic daily movement. Standing from a chair, climbing stairs, walking any real distance without stopping to rest. That's the clock. That's what's actually ticking. And here's the urgent part. Doing nothing doesn't just mean staying the same. It means the rate of loss keeps compounding year over year at an accelerating pace. So here's where most people get stuck, and it's worth naming honestly, because I'd be doing you a disservice if I glossed over it. The instinct when you hear the clock is ticking faster is either panic or denial. Some people spiral into fear and do nothing because the problem feels too big, too late, too complicated to address. Others do the opposite. They minimize it, tell themselves it's not really happening to them yet, and push the whole conversation off to some vague future date. Both responses lead to the same outcome. Nothing changes, and the clock keeps accelerating in the background regardless of whether you're thinking about it. There's also a subtler trap, and it's one I want to name specifically because it derails so many well-intentioned efforts. People often focus on exactly one lever, usually exercise, and assume that's the whole solution. They start lifting weights, feel encouraged, and then wonder months later why their strength gains feel disappointing or slow. In most cases, the missing piece isn't the training itself. It's that muscle isn't built and maintained by exercise alone. It requires raw material, protein, and it requires the recovery window where the actual rebuilding happens, which is sleep. Skip either one and you're pressing the gas with the parking brake still on. This is exactly why we're covering 3 levers today, not one. Because the research is clear that they work together, not in isolation. Let me give you 2 versions of the same person, because I think the contrast makes this clearer than any statistic could. Picture 2 men, both 63, both retired around the same time, both in reasonably similar health at the starting line. Call them a tale of 2 directions, because that's really what this is. The first spends his 60s the way a lot of people quietly do. Nothing dramatic goes wrong. He just doesn't do anything differently. He eats the way he always has. Decent meals, but protein mostly concentrated at dinner. Nothing at breakfast beyond coffee and toast. He stays reasonably active, walks the dog, does yard work, but never picks up a weight or resistance band. His sleep, without him really noticing, gets lighter and more fragmented year by year. He chalks it up to just being an older man now, nothing to be done about it. By 71, small things have quietly stacked up. Stairs require a hand on the railing every time now, not just on bad days. He's had 2 falls in the past 18 months, neither serious, both frightening. His doctor has started using the word frailty in his appointments gently, but it's there now, on the chart. The second man hears roughly the information we've just covered, somewhere around 63, and decides to actually apply it. Nothing extreme, 2 resistance sessions a week with bands, a habit of putting eggs or Greek yogurt into his breakfast instead of skipping protein until dinner, and a real effort to get to bed at a consistent time instead of falling asleep in front of the television and stumbling to bed at 1 a.m. By 71, the difference isn't dramatic in the way a magazine cover promises. He's not lifting more than his grandson, but he's still climbing his porch steps without the railing. He's still carrying his own groceries in one trip. His doctor's chart says stable, active, not frail. Same starting point, same 8 years. Completely different trajectory. And the entire difference traces back to whether those 3 levers got addressed or got quietly ignored. Lever 1. Resistance training, the direct countermeasure. This is the most well-established lever, and for good reason. Muscle responds to mechanical stress by rebuilding itself stronger. Resistance training, whether that's resistance bands, body weight movements, or light weights, is the single most direct signal you can send your body to slow, and in many cases partially reverse, the muscle loss driving this whole clock forward. Research consistently shows that even 2 to 4 sessions per week, each a modest 30 to 45 minutes, produces measurable improvements in strength, bone density, and balance in adults well into their 70s and 80s. This isn't about becoming an athlete. It's about sending your body a consistent signal that this muscle is still needed, so it stops treating it as expendable. A realistic week might look like this: 2 sessions focused on the major lower body muscles, chair squats, calf raises, gentle leg presses with a band, since leg strength is what most directly protects against falls. 1 or 2 additional sessions covering the upper body, seated rows with a band, wall push-ups, shoulder presses with light dumbbells. That's it. 4 sessions, none of them longer than 45 minutes, is enough to matter according to the research, and it's genuinely sustainable in a way that an ambitious, unrealistic plan usually isn't. Lever 2. Protein, the raw material the clock depends on. Here's something that surprises a lot of people, including those who eat what they consider a perfectly reasonable diet. As we age, our bodies become less efficient at using the protein we eat to actually build and repair muscle, a phenomenon researchers call anabolic resistance. It means the same plate of food that built muscle effectively at 30 does considerably less of that job at 65 or 70. The standard recommended daily protein intake for adults, roughly 0.8 grams per kilogram of body weight, was never designed with this in mind. A growing body of research now points to older adults needing considerably more, generally in the range of 1.0 to 1.2 grams per kilogram daily, with some newer research suggesting even higher amounts specifically for those already dealing with muscle loss. For a 150-pound adult, it works out to somewhere around 70 to 90 grams of protein a day, noticeably more than most people over 60 are actually consuming. There's a second detail buried in the research that matters just as much as the total amount: distribution across the day. Multiple studies point to a threshold of roughly 25 to 30 grams of protein per meal as the amount needed to meaningfully trigger muscle protein synthesis, the biological process of actually building and repairing tissue. Eating that much protein at dinner and almost none at breakfast is a common pattern, and it means you're missing the trigger twice a day instead of hitting it 3 times. In practical terms, that might mean 2 eggs with a side of Greek yogurt at breakfast rather than just toast and coffee, a chicken sandwich or a can of tuna at lunch instead of a bowl of pasta alone, salmon, lean beef, or a hearty portion of beans and lentils at dinner. None of this requires a specialized diet or expensive supplements. It requires noticing that breakfast, specifically, is where most people's protein intake quietly falls apart, and correcting that one meal alone often closes most of the gap. Lever 3. Sleep, the repair window almost nobody discusses. This is the lever that gets the least attention, and it may be the most quietly important one. Muscle isn't actually built while you're lifting a weight. It's built afterward, during recovery, and a significant portion of that recovery happens during deep sleep. As we age, sleep architecture changes. Deep sleep specifically tends to decrease, and that matters because deep sleep is closely tied to the release of growth hormone, one of the body's key drivers of tissue repair and muscle maintenance. Fragmented, shallow sleep doesn't just leave you tired. Research suggests it can blunt the very anabolic hormone response your muscles depend on to recover and rebuild. There is genuinely interesting research on consuming a slow-digesting protein, like casein, shortly before bed. Studies have found this can measurably increase muscle protein synthesis during the overnight period, even in older men specifically. I want to be precise here, though, because overselling this would be irresponsible. This pre-sleep protein research shows a clear short-term synthesis boost, but the evidence for whether this specific timing trick meaningfully builds more long-term muscle mass in older adults as opposed to younger trainees is still limited and not yet fully settled. It's a promising piece of the puzzle, not a guaranteed fix on its own. The foundation is still consistent resistance training and adequate total daily protein. Beyond that specific pre-sleep protein question, the more foundational issue is simply protecting the deep sleep you're still capable of getting. A few things genuinely help here, and none of them require a prescription. Keeping a consistent bedtime and wake time, even on weekends, helps stabilize the circadian rhythm that governs when your body releases its key repair hormones. Limiting caffeine in the afternoon matters more with age, since the body clears it more slowly than it did decades ago. And if snoring, gasping, or long pauses in breathing during sleep have ever come up, either from a partner's observation or your own tiredness during the day, that's worth raising directly with your doctor, since undiagnosed sleep apnea is more common in older adults than most people realize, and it directly interferes with the deep sleep stages where muscle repair actually happens. None of this is about chasing a perfect 8 hours every single night. It's about recognizing that sleep isn't passive downtime you can shortchange without consequence. It's an active part of the same system that resistance training and protein intake are trying to support, and neglecting it undercuts the other two levers, even when you're doing everything right on the training and nutrition side. Here's the twist in all of this, the piece that reframes the entire conversation. We started by talking about a clock ticking faster after 60, but the truth is that framing, while accurate, misses the most important detail. This isn't actually a clock in the sense of something counting down toward an unavoidable endpoint. It's closer to a thermostat. It responds continuously to the inputs you give it. Train the muscle, and the rate of decline slows. Feed it adequately, and it has the raw material to rebuild. Let it recover properly during sleep, and the repair process that training triggers actually gets to finish its job. Miss all three, and the clock accelerates unopposed. Address even one, and you slow it. Address all three together, and the research suggests the effect compounds, each lever supporting the other two. The people who end up losing their independence in their 70s and 80s in the most severe cases are very often not people who were dealt an unusually harsh biological hand. They are disproportionately people who never heard this specific information clearly enough, early enough, to act on it. So let's bring this together into something concrete you can actually act on this week. On the training side, 2 to 4 short sessions of resistance work weekly. Bands, body weight, or light weights, cleared first with your doctor, especially if you're managing any existing condition. On the nutrition side, aim for somewhere around 70 to 90 grams of protein daily if you're in a typical adult weight range, and just as importantly, spread it out. A real protein source at breakfast, not just dinner, aiming for that 25 to 30 gram range at each meal where you can. On the sleep side, prioritize consistent, quality sleep the same way you'd prioritize any other health intervention, because the recovery that happens during deep sleep is where the actual rebuilding takes place. If sleep has been a struggle, that's worth raising with your doctor directly. It's not a minor lifestyle preference. It's a functional part of this entire system. None of these 3 levers requires becoming a different person or overhauling your entire life overnight. They require consistency applied together over months, because that's the actual timeline this clock operates on, both in the direction of decline and in the direction of recovery. So if there's one thing to take from everything we've just covered, it's this. The clock ticking faster after 60 is real, it's documented, and ignoring it doesn't pause it. But it is not a countdown you're powerless against. It responds directly to 3 things almost entirely within your control: how you move, what you eat, and how well you sleep. The people who hear this in their 60s and act on it are, quite simply, in a different position a decade later than the people who hear it and set it aside for later. If this reached you today, let today be the day you address even one of these 3 levers. Not all of them perfectly, just one, starting now. If someone in your life needs to hear this, a parent, a sibling, a friend who's been putting off exactly this conversation, send it to them. Sometimes the only thing standing between someone and actually starting is simply hearing, clearly, what the stakes really are. Thank you for spending this time with me today. If this was useful, stay with me. There's more waiting for you right after this.